In this episode, I have the immense pleasure of speaking to Chris Dancy. Chris is a health and wellness pioneer, healthcare technology leader, and entrepreneur, and he is frequently referred to as the world's most connected human. As a personal health visionary and innovator, he utilizes up to 700 sensors, self-diagnostic devices, applications, and services, which he uses to track, analyze, and optimize personal health management. He measures anything from caloric intake to spiritual well-being. And through this, he is able to demonstrate the connections of otherwise invisible data and forecast a transformation that will soon take place in consumer health and nutrition, the healthcare business, and beyond. Join us in a conversation about values, vulnerability, radical change, practicality as a way to bring transformation about. It's a personal recount of his story and how he used his background in the technology industry and his personal insights to transform his life and the way that he is using healthcare management and the quantified self. I'm sure you're going to enjoy this podcast. Tune in. So, hello and welcome, everybody. I'm so excited to be welcoming Chris Dancy today and to have an amazing conversation on connections. You know, we like to listen to people transforming their worlds themselves. I think I cannot bring you a better example of someone transforming connections to the level that Chris has. I've had the pleasure of meeting him in person, and I'm delighted to welcome him on Transforming Worlds. Hello, Chris. Welcome.
Hi. Hi. It's nice to see you again after all these years.
Same here. You're looking wonderful. You're looking really amazing. And that's so good to see as well. I mean,
Thank
obviously, it's
you.
because of all the things you do, but
I mean, a lot of it, and then I also really focus on something I started in 2017 called deliberate rest. So, not just getting good sleep, but deliberate rest. So I have periods of the day where I deliberately just rest. I have this saying I say to my spouse all the time. Life only gives you so many steps and so many trials and so many struggles. So save them up.
that's right. I think we should all use that. It's rest is an important part of
Yeah.
being so energetic the rest of the time.
Yeah.
So tell us a bit more for the audience to know who you are and what it is that you do.
I like to tongue in cheek say I'm a D-list internet celebrity. So I'm a 56-year-old person who lives in New York, in the United States.
Mm.
I'm known to the world as the world's most connected person. And when people say the most connected person, they think like I have a lot of LinkedIn contacts or I have a lot of friends but essentially in 2008, when I turned 40, I was about 320 pounds. I don't know what the kilos is on that, but I was a pretty large man. I
Hmm.
smoked 2 packs of cigarettes a day. I had been on drinking and drugging and been on antidepressants for 21 years at that point, benzodiazepines for 15 of those years. My life was just a mess. And sitting in my house one day in 2008, I thought, I'm going to look up something on the internet. And I went and looked at my search history on YouTube or on Google and like had all these things. It was like, oh my gosh, my computer knows I'm a mess. And then kind of dawned on me, I don't know I'm a mess. I mean, I knew I was kind of a mess because everyone told me, but like it was really weird seeing it in black and white.
Yeah.
So I sat and started coding a system to watch what I did anytime I touched anything digital that was connected to the internet and have it create a log. And that log was a Google Calendar at the time. And by 2012, my days had anywhere from 5 to 15,000 entries that would automatically be created anytime I did anything, from ordering food online to going on a ride in the car to like sending an email. And I started putting some logic behind that to color code it. And then visually, gosh, by 2013, it was just obvious where the good things and bad things were in my life. By 2014, I'd written some routines to kind of take that feedback that was going to the counter and suggest topics to me, little nudges. And then I was at a conference and someone sitting behind me saw my computer calendar writing stuff, like all of this, having all these appointments in it in real time. And the rest is history. I just I ended up on the cover of Business Week, on the cover of the most influential person you've never heard of outside of Silicon Valley, designing software for everyone from Google to Microsoft, teaching classes, writing a book, having multiple TV shows, and then from 2016 until well, till to this day, I spend most of my time helping organizations or speaking at events all over the world about the power of self-transformation through
Mhm.
using technology that
Yes.
you designed for you.
Yeah. Yeah. That's how we met.
Yeah.
When you were on a stage, indeed, here in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
And I think more people should hear your story because it really is about transformation through connections. And as you say, it's not so much about connecting with others, but gaining a deep understanding of ourselves. And I'm a transformation designer, and in design, we say that to design is to transform existing conditions into preferred ones. Those are the words of the late Herbert Simon, who was the dean of the Carnegie Mellon School of Design. And I think it's so clear and succinct, right? Transforming existing conditions into preferred ones. And as a designer, it always begs the question, preferred for whom? And it's
Mm.
absolutely wonderful how you manage to look at this was your life and you
Mm.
turn it into a life that you are proud of, that would be much more preferable for you. And there is so much learned from this because it's not about embracing technology only. It's about accessing our humanity through technologies. I'm sure you're going to tell us more about that. But you say, you were a mess. I actually saw the photo because it was in your presentation, what you look
Yeah.
like. And what is it that actually triggered the moment that you said, okay, it's got to change now? Because change happens in an instant. The moment we decide, okay, now's the time to transform. But we
Yeah.
have to face the pain. We've got to face the discomfort. What was that for you?
It was literally the moment I looked in my Google search history and I was looking for, and it was like I had been overweight and had all sorts of medical
Mhm.
problems my whole life at
Yeah.
40. So from teenager until that time. So I had a million times that I wanted to change.
Yes.
But I'd always somehow successfully managed through and just created another crisis. That being said, I saw my Google history and there was like a porn site and another site on like finding a prostitute and another site on like getting drugs online and like all of these things that were just like, and I normally would clear my internet history.
Right. That's
So
it.
I
Because,
had forgotten and
yeah.
I was just like, oh my gosh, I am a mess. And then I thought to myself, wouldn't it be neat if I could see this in a private way in real time?
Mhm.
So I could see like, because some days weren't horrible, some days were pretty good. I wasn't a total,
Yeah.
and then that's how I thought a calendar. I need to see my life and everything I do on a calendar, and I need to see appointments with failure as easily as I see appointments of success.
Right. So seeing is believing in some ways for you, right? So
Yeah.
it's like, okay, now I've got to face it. It's being shown to me. And
Well,
then
yeah,
that
and
journey.
I also had to get over being ashamed of it because like
Right.
you go from clearing your internet history to wanting to make a document of your life, even the
Mm.
darkest parts in real time that anyone might be able to read in the future. I
Yes.
mean, the level of courage that I only later came to understand that I'm okay now if I'm totally transparent
Mm.
was probably the thing that kept it going into going to this day. I mean, my
Yeah.
spouse will sometimes say to me, if I eat too many candy bars or something, and I'll still, I'll log all of that and
It's
everything
all
that
public.
yeah, and my spouse was like, I'm so proud of you because you just log it even. I'm like, even if it's bad, it's still real. The
Mm.
problem is when things are bad, we choose to hide them,
Right.
and we choose to,
Right.
it's like the internet 101. You show people only the good stuff, but I choose to show myself everything.
Wow. That's admirable. And what happened from then on? So, what was the journey like? Because I remember that initially
Mm,
people would refer to you with terms like you're a cyborg and you're like
mm,
this and that. Because,
mm,
I was explaining at home to my children that I'd be speaking to you, and I said, imagine that I would meet people from a previous era and they would see that I wear glasses and they're like, what's that technology on your face? It would be unfathomable for
yeah,
them. I
yeah.
think that what you're doing is also very surprising to many of us now. Like looking at you, we're looking at a little bit of the future, of our own future. So tell us how you got there.
You know, and to that point, I mean, I still wear glasses, and except now I have to wear bifocals. And my glasses today, they have cameras and
Yeah.
sensors and all sorts of things. So, for me, when I was called, and people would refer to me as a cyborg and a machine and all of those things, because I used to have to wear like an armful of sensors to capture as much data, and then room sensors I'd carry with me. And I understand why people, would say that, but I think what was really important to me, and I think why my story was so provocative at that time, was I saw past the devices. You said it yourself. I saw the humanity in them, right?
Yeah.
Those weren't just 10,000 steps that day. They were 7,000 steps to meet, someone that was really special to me, and 15 steps to actually avoid going to a room where I might have a bad memory, right? So it was the meaning behind the numbers that was so that really led to me understanding the transformation. And so much of our technology now, through its quest to be convenient, will help dictate to us what it believes is important. And for me, that journey was really about, listen, steps are great, but there are things behind the steps that are more important. So it was linking pieces of data together. A perfect example of this was in the beginning, to even get a hold of, because I wouldn't eat much more than hamburgers. Right? I never had a salad. Like by the time I turned 40, I'd never eaten a vegetable ever. Wow. But it was understanding that different data types could be linked together. So for example, if I wanted to have something really bad, like a McDonald's Big Mac, I could have it, but I'd have to walk to it and pay cash. And if I wanted a Subway, which was a little bit less bad because, than a McDonald's burger, because they actually, would force you to put vegetables on it, I could bike ride there and I could use a credit card. But if I wanted a bowl from Chipotle, which was like, chicken and rice and healthier things, I could drive there. So it was about linking the types of behavior together to then create these kind of preferred routines that, and what I found was most of what I wanted in life, I wanted now, which the now was always the healthiest route in this new paradigm. So walking to McDonald's with cash is going to take some time and it's going to be hard. Yeah. But driving to Chipotle with a credit card was, and again, it wasn't just a credit card. I could use digital payment, right? So the middle step, I actually had to take a credit card with me. So I learned a lot.
And you were also measuring your moods while doing all of this, right?
100%. I still do it to this day. In fact, to this day, when I meet with people, I have a whole system now that evaluates through AI my mood with that person. Yeah. So for example, after we get done today, I have a system that will look at our meetings. This is my system. And you'll see here that it has a feeling, some hearts. And I'm showing a screen right now with this feelings. And then next to it, you'll see this emotion. And then it'll show me happy, optimized. But then what it'll do is it'll go through and summarize those interactions with me and how they worked or how they didn't work for me based on those mood settings. And I can do so much more now with mood and emotion than I ever could back in that day, just because the AI assists me with all of this. It's simple things like my system will now tell me that it's time to get out of a relationship. It'll tell me it's now time to change providers, whether it be a doctor or a restaurant or a specific place. So yeah, mood was super. I'm glad you remember that. Mood was super important to me early. It's since become transformational. And it's now just more the mood, it's emotion. So I engineer toward a set of emotions each day than a set of reactions to circumstances.
Help us define that word you just used. You said it's become transformational. What does that mean?
So for me, you have a really eloquent definition of transformation and design and all these other things. For me, transformation at its core is it's the ability to be in a state where the past is no longer accessible.
Wow.
Because anything else wouldn't be transformation. It'd be evolution.
Beautiful.
It's just what I think. And you ask, I don't know.
It's very powerful. And how is that, and everything you're doing, how is that impacting people around you? Because obviously it's impacting you. It's changed you enormously. Are you being an inspiration to others? Are they copying your behaviors, or are they, to the contrary, maybe they're going off technology altogether? What reactions is your environment?
It was hard. In the beginning, it was very hard. From 2014 to 2016, people didn't know how to treat me because it was the technology was too much for them. That's all they could see. And then when they heard my story, they really didn't know how to act. Technology has gotten smaller, so that became easier. People don't notice all the technology on me now. They don't notice all the measurements. I think it really didn't change for me until I got to a point where I understood myself as a piece of technology. It might sound strange, but like I saw what I did with my mind and my body combined as using any tool, except I'm using two to create an outcome. And that was when I met my spouse in 2016. So about 2 years into the radical transformation. And my spouse saw me both as kind of this public internet technology cyborg, but also as a very vulnerable, very emotional, very radical person, and helped me integrate those two. And then we were married in 2018. And then getting married just reset everything, because suddenly, after being single my whole life and having this radical transformation, and then meeting someone who's significantly younger, I'm 56, my spouse is 32. Um, I had to start thinking about things about my own life and my own data journey and my own use of technology that would impact us both. Because now we'd be living together. I'd have in-laws. I'd have people who might not understand this way of living. And to that end, the biggest transformation and the biggest way it affected me and others was by 2018, I stopped talking about my technology through the lens of the numbers and the metrics and how they informed me, and started talking about a set of values. And what I did was my spouse and I sat down 6 months before our wedding, after we were engaged for we dated for a year, got engaged for 6 months, and then sat down and said, if we're going to do this, we need to decide what's mutually important to both of us. So we came up with 6 core values: health, home, family, work, service, and finances. And they all are interconnected. Some are goals that are very long term. Some of those services are, or values are very long term. But that being said, everything we did, from spending $1 to scheduling something to having a relationship, was then viewed through that lens of the value that it brought to our family. After that, and people started meeting me, and they would speak to me, and they would immediately say, and they might not even know, because they, may or may not know who I am. It doesn't really matter. People would automatically say, "You're different." And I would have, I wouldn't be the censors and the things. And I started asking, what do you mean? Like, even when you wrote to me, I was like, what do you want your audience to feel? I wrote back and asked you that.
Yes.
And I think it's just, I don't know any other way to describe it other than I don't know how not to think about other people's needs now that I have a set of values that dictate mine.
Hooray.
Yeah.
To all of that,
Yeah.
to being radical, to being vulnerable, to being different, to all of that. That's
Yeah.
so important, because any transformation brings with it a lot of tensions, right? It feels very liberating, but at the same time, it feels very confining, like saying, okay, now we're going to stick to these values. And then someone says, yeah, but what about this other value? And you're like, well, no, these are the ones, because you are a system thinker and you're a technologist and you have a background in this and you understand exactly how that works. And when you start creating this constellation of values, of behaviors, of feedback loops in terms of your physiology, your
Yeah.
emotions, your whole world is changing, right? And so you must have to face the fact that you are not considered normal anymore. Like I'm not normal either. Like I'm confessing to that right here, right now. But
Yeah.
that what people consider normality is actually way off the tracks, and that what you're being able to do is say, I'm going to forget the cultural narrative of, jumping on the hamster wheel, running to work every day, being stressed, being intoxicated, going on doing Google searches that I'm not proud of, etc., and saying, what does that look for me? And how is that going to change how I contribute to the world? That's a huge act of bravery, but I'm sure you had to really, figure out a way of how to communicate this to others so that it wouldn't be perceived as a provocation, but it would be perceived as an invitation to do things in new ways.
I think, you know, so much of that was, I'd like to say that had some, stroke of genius about like creating a values-based system that I could measure. For me, I found this, I don't know if it's a system or a I don't know how you describe it, but it's something called the Holmes Raw Life Stress Inventory. And it's Holmes as HOLMES, and then it's RAHE, Life Stress Inventory. And when I found it and how I ended up going to this values-based system was it was this idea that there are things that happen to your in your life. Like number one is the death of a spouse, number two would be divorce, marital separation. And these things would have some type of scoring system. And then those scoring systems, as these things happen, you change a job, change your diet, run out of gas, really simple things to really big things. Those would then add up, and those total points would lead you. It's like if you have these things happen in a year, 150 points or less, you could have a major issue.
Wow.
So I started saying, again, it's my whole life story. It's really nothing more than we don't know how to measure what we care about. So we care about what we measure. I mean, I end every keynote with that same sentence. Everyone gets handed measurements and they act like those are them. And like, no, that's not the way life works. It wasn't the way it worked with smartphones. It wasn't the way it worked with telephones. It wasn't the way it worked with newspapers. You're not told what to believe and you believe in it. But your agency comes from understanding that.
Yes.
And so being able to go back and use the system to really define these value metrics for my family was the only way forward. Again, it wasn't smart because I couldn't enforce my spouse to count their steps or their sleep or their calories. But I could ask them, do our values align around these things and how will we measure our successfulness with those values?
Yes.
Different thing right away. And now I have two people that can do this. I think any civil society has something like this, whether it's a religious moral code, if you're from a very, stringent religious part of the world, or, a very societal base. As in the Netherlands, you guys have just the cooperative spirit just around how you handle transportation is unlike anything in the whole world. But yeah, I'd like to say that it was some stroke of inspiration, but at the end of the day, when you're numbers based, you have to make them work.
Yeah, but it's still, I think there's a genius in looking at it in such a practical manner, right? So
Oh,
most of us
yeah.
dream of, I mean, I certainly do, of improving my health, and then I keep postponing that and thinking, okay, I'll take care of that later, and having the vision, bringing it into practice, being practical about it, setting key measurements for yourself, having discussions with others, bringing it into your family, into your community. That is what genius is made of, Chris. That is how we change the world.
I
It's
actually do this in community too. So, I mean, part of my time today is I volunteer a lot of times in my community. I actually build AI systems in my municipality. So, everything from public health to the police department all runs on stuff I've built, but it's all value based. Right. So, the first thing I do is I build these design workshops on designing the values. A lot of times corporations talk about their vision, mission, and values, but they're just kind of platitudes. They're not like really the way you function in the world.
yeah.
And I think it wasn't until I learned to translate like my values to make them accessible to others or make them accessible to my spouse. For example, my spouse does not like some of the same type of technology I do, right? My spouse is very driven by feelings that are very difficult to articulate. I'll just say it that way. So what I had to do was I had to create this kind of whiteboard system for my spouse and I, so that each week, without looking at, a bunch of numbers, we could use something we both agreed on. In this case, it was a digital whiteboard that had colored stickies, and those colored stickies aligned back to our values. And my spouse is really not good at planning, but is really good at remembering. So what we would do is we'd have one section of this sticky board where we'd actually reflect back with stickies, things that were good, not so good, things we need to change, and the colored sticky to our value, and then look forward or feel forward is what we call it, about where we'd like to have things different the next week. And we do this every Sunday as a family. We sit down and talk about our values. We use this sticky board. And then when I started doing this with organizations and with small groups, it was transformational again. People understand if they could say it's not good or bad, there's a middle step. It was so-so, or I want to visualize doing this next week, but actually I want to actualize that. And then what is that and what is it tied to? So
and indeed, as you said about transformational, then they start wondering how they ever did it any other way, right?
well, and it's hard to argue with. It's really hard to argue with someone who has a set of values that are so defined. I mean, when my spouse and I worked on building these, we were very focused on like, well, what are those specific values and how do they function. So for example, if I come in here and look at family, these are our value set
Yes.
here and the tasks, and I pull up family, we have the actions. So the actions are the things we do that would be things that we commit to do and how we want to communicate. Our guardrails are things that we have to actually do if things don't go as successful as we want them to do. So as you can see, I had a task here is go find my great grandfather's library. That was something I had to do back in 22 when I moved. So it was really about, okay, we know the actions we're going to take for these values. We know the guardrails, so if things start to go wrong, what we need to do to get them back online, and we know our safeguards and what we'll do if they're violated. I don't know. It's like I even for a short time had a terms of service for my friends. Like my friends had to sign a terms of like some software with like what they expected from me to be my friend and what I expected from them. And I think it was one of those things that when they saw it just so clearly, they're like, oh, okay, so this is one of those things where you actually expect certain things from me because we are friends. And I was just like, yeah, again, I don't think, and this is I'm sharing an example, if you watch the video version of this, of actually my terms of service I had from 2016. So people.
How often do you adapt those?
I don't do terms of service anymore in a paper format. I do when I meet people and we start to become close and they want to hang out and things. I say, yeah, I'd love to hang out with you, but I'd like to share some things with you that are important specifically to me just because of the way I live my life. And that's when I'll introduce them to the concept of a terms of service. I'll say, you probably see them in software, but I have one. So I still adopt them. They're just digital now, so people get it. Just like when people enter my house has a quick start manual that ties in our family values, but also tells you a little bit about the house and the neighbors and what to expect. And if you're uncomfortable with something and what things are important. So we have our house priorities, which are communications, cleanliness, follow through. So the house stuff, anytime anyone visits, from a service person to a neighbor, they're given a quick start guide to the house and how we operate.
How do they react?
People are stunned. I mean, I'm not going to lie. People are stunned. But what's interesting is, usually the stunned comes from visits. Because by the time someone gets a terms of service from me, we've known each other for a few months. And by the time they know me and then visit my house, they almost expect something like this. I think the hardest thing is just sometimes people will have this kind of weird reaction where it's almost a sense of shame. Like, I don't know why I haven't done this for myself. And can you help me? And it's like, that was never the goal. My goal was never to make people feel bad about what they have or don't have around their own boundaries and their own sets of priorities. My goal was really to make it clear what mine were. So I'm a lot more accessible, right? You wouldn't work with any tool, right? Digital tool or a new oven or a complex system. You wouldn't work with them without having some instructions. And I think the fact that we don't have them as people is criminal.
Wow. Wow, that's a statement right there. Imagine that everyone would do this. What would our society look like?
I mean, I think we'd have, the same type of silos. It'd be just larger, right? So instead of having kind of two polarized silos like a lot of nations are having right now, you'd have hundreds of thousands of millions of micro silos, which is kind of like the internet used to be. There was like these things called web rings where you could like click at the bottom of a web page and go to another page just like that person's page. And I think communities in some ways historically were set up like this, people with similar values, because they would come together and they would settle a community and then things wouldn't work out and they'd move to another community. I think our society adopting things like this would look a lot like basically old communities did, but because our society today is so virtualized, it wouldn't be by location, it would be by connection, And I think the algorithms in so many ways are just sorting people into yes or no, black or white. And that's where a lot of our challenges are coming from. And I think AI will help with that.
It becomes dehumanized, right? Because we are put into these binary systems whilst we are, as you say, complex systems. And if we don't honor that complexity, then we will lose ourselves in the technology.
And that's exactly what was happening to me when I changed at 2008. I was becoming, because all of the technology did was make my bad habits faster. You went from having to go look for prostitutes to being able to have them delivered. So technology has a great way of making bad things go faster and good things seem confusing. I always say in my talks, technology can either be good or easy, but it can't be both.
Mm,
And I think until people understand, if something's easy, it's probably killing you. And if something's good, it's probably not easy to use.
interesting.
Mm.
But you do need some level of self-awareness or knowing yourself in order to be able to put these things into practice, right?
Yeah.
Because,
And then some level of where you're not suffering. I mean, so many people, I mean, if you look at where I was in 2008, I was at the bottom of the barrel, in and
yeah,
out of jail and institutions and all other kind of stuff. I barely had enough energy left to even realize what I did. And I think so often we expect people just to climb out of these holes. And these holes are massive today with young people,
I
the
know.
depression and the
Yeah,
overwhelming anxiety,
yeah,
everything from climate to radicalization to crime to just the fear of just living today is so overwhelming. I am a little bit more gracious than I used to be, but I still have, I still tell people, you still can do this. It's not like it's out of the realms, but just start where you can. But
right.
it's
So
it's
it's
hard.
small steps.
Yeah, but it's so hard. I'm gonna be, I mean, where I struggle today, just as a human,
Mm,
is I really think it's easier than people want to believe it is, which makes me frustrated often because I'm like, why? Why? You don't have to do that. And then it's like I have to remember, and it's so hard for me to remember because of the transformation. Like I just
right.
can't. That no, I can understand if I look at a picture or have someone tell me a story that I didn't know, right? So you have to, in AA, they call it hitting bottom, whatever that thing, and you asked me earlier, what moment did you realize it? Whatever that epiphany is, you have to find it. But until then, you have to be very careful around people because they break so easily around anyone who's got their shit together. They fall apart.
But
You know, you
then the
ask, you've asked me a
responsibility
few.
is
Yeah,
the
because they see the
responsibility.
responsibility. Because if you're carrying yourself with a certain level of awareness, and I literally mean a certain level, you break
Right.
people when they witness you because awareness is contagious, right? And if someone sees someone who understands themselves that well that they can't help but understand you, it's frightening. We like to say, oh, he's empathetic. Well, there's empathy and there's hyper empathy, right? There's the ability to feel beyond the feelings, or the ability to almost have a precognitive layer to your pain, to someone else's pain. And, parents do this all the time. Like, if you do that, you're going to get in trouble. If you do that, you're going to get hurt, because parents, by your second or third kid, you know what's going to happen, right? But
Mm.
you just have to be careful, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and at the same time, the responsibility is with those of us who do face our vulnerability, who do face the fact that we don't have all the answers,
No.
and that this is actually a process of explicitation, right? It's a process of making things we don't understand explicit so that they may be then known, because there's something beautiful that you say that is, why are we so obsessed with technology and data? Once we've got data and we actually aggregate that data, we have information. Once we aggregate that information, we have knowledge. Once we
Yep.
aggregate knowledge, we become wise.
Yep.
And so
Yep.
it's how interesting when you take us through this path to understand that by being absolutely practical, perhaps to some of our audience, very meticulous, almost unattainably so, but very clear about what you want, then you can design for it. So design is really a process of making intention manifest. That's what it is. We make stuff.
Yes.
Designers make stuff, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I
And
think,
I'm, and again, you just go to like design in the Netherlands. I mean, it's just it's next level. You know what I mean? I just whenever I go, I just everything about Scandinavian design and Danish design, it's breathtaking to me because like you said, that people manifested that. They thought about it. I'm so glad you remember the information, knowledge, wisdom pyramid.
yeah.
One of the things I did because my spouse couldn't get their head around that. So I had to create this chart of like how to spend your time, right?
Mm.
So I had to design like a time chart. Because a lot of people ask me, well, how did you know to do that? Or like, and I'm like, well, you have to think about your mind. So on one side, you have to think about your thinking and your how your mind then manifests that thinking. On the other side, you have to think about the timings. Is something you're doing right now? Is something you'll do in the future? And then you have to kind of work your way through, like, is this something that came to me, or is this something that was done to me? Like someone says something to me and I say something, or I just have this moment of inspiration. So I came up with this chart that I created, and it's under this kind of maxim of you can't save time, you can only spend it right. And on the left hand side, I have the kind of the time domains you would live in, which are thinking, which is constant, like all the time right now. Being, which is kind of like a daily thing. You're just kind of being, you're getting by. Doing is kind of like where you're getting stuff done. It usually happens on a monthly monthly basis. Tasks live in doing. Being lives in like what you're journaling and getting done. Your intentions, your reflections, your interactions with other people, those special moments. At the 3 month or quarterly or seasonal level, you've kind of got your planning. Hey, I'm going to try to get this done. And then yearly, you've got your big goals. And then your values really live out at this level of what I would call generational. And that's where, things that are usually 10, 15, 20, 25 years, things that really don't change a whole lot. And values is a tricky word because
Yeah.
value, people are always like, well, this is my value. I'm like, well, it's not, because you didn't do that the other day. It might be a priority, but a value is something that's pretty much set for a good chunk of time and can change. Again, if you lose a spouse, your values are going to change, right? You're suddenly, your desire to keep yourself healthy might slip because you're in a
Yeah.
slight little bit of depression. So, values aren't inflexible, but they usually involve a major life change. But understanding that design for me, whether it was for myself or how I work with time, because I really consider myself at the core a temporal designer. I design
Mm.
for long periods of time that affect myself and others.
Yeah.
What more are wedding vows than I promise to love someone beyond the grave? They literally are in the vows, right?
Yeah.
So when you get past like just the day-to-day temporal temporality of living, you understand that no, what you're together is stitching together a time without you. And the time without you is designed in the moment today based on this pattern that you call a set of values and how you're remembered and who remembers you. And, and I'll just end here. But like when I was getting ready to have our wedding and I was thinking about our vows, I got to that point in the vows where you talk about, to love, honor, and cherish and until death do us part. And
Mm.
I really struggled with that just because of the 20 some year age range, right? It was
Yeah.
like my
Yeah.
spouse, I could die by the time my spouse is my age today. Um, and I thought to myself, well, what happens if love, honor, and cherish could go beyond till death do us part? And then I thought, and I was talking to my spouse, and I said, well, this is weird because, like, how do I love you when I'm not here? And we got talking about it and everything. He said, well, what's the most important thing if something were to happen to you that you would want from me? And I said, I would want you to meet someone, fall in love, and go to your grave with that person. He said, well, then that's really simple. You have to love me in a way that if someone were to come along once you're gone, I wouldn't be able to accept anything less, and your love will live forever.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so moving.
So I love my spouse in a way that no one will ever be able to match that love. And if they do, they are worthy of the spot.
Mm. Mm. Beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting because the way you present the information just now is a way that's very helpful for most of us. Because for most people, it's easier to look back and analyze things than to look forward and
Mhm.
plan for things, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I think there's a difference in how we do things and how we explain things. And there's a lot of value in what you're saying in terms of be intentional now about how you will want to look back at things later. And as technology is advancing and AI these days can do anything for us, I mean, from videos to they could potentially create this whole conversation if we were to feed them information about our values beforehand.
Yeah.
So how's that going to accelerate moving forward? Like, how will that look like for future generations? Like, essentially, as you just said, when we're not here and people
Mm.
look back at the legacy that you've left,
Mm.
how will that influence the world that they live in?
Well, right now we're still early on with AI. And for those people who've used AI, they understand that, it's got all sorts of inherent problems.
Yeah.
That being said, let's just put that over here.
Mm-hmm.
The ability for a piece of software to look at all of your photos and instantly pull out happy moments, which most modern smartphones will create little mini movies. It's pretty remarkable.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's
Yeah.
not hallucinating, right? It's not. It's just saying these might be important, happy moments, and it
Mm-hmm.
might just be a difference in the GPS coordinates on the photo. It might be the way you're looking. It might be the weather that it can then look up in real time from the GPS coordinates and the date. Go back and get the weather. Um, it could be all of those things. So I think when we look forward and we think about those young people looking back, I actually believe we're probably at the end of the darkest as far as technology is. We're nearing the end of the dark times is what I would call it.
Mm-hmm.
Because what we're going to see is, the ability for technology to reflect back to us honestly who we are and what we value is happening. We just see it. We see it in the music, how Spotify or Apple Music will suddenly recommend, music to you that kind of matches your mood of like, how did it know? So first off, it's not magic, right? It knows because you were you. People need to
Mm-hmm.
know this, right? Because I think the biggest fear I have about the next 10 years is people feeling, well, what purpose do I have? Because it's just happening for me. Well, no, and I mean, it's not happening just you without you were to take your phone and put it in a drawer. It's pretty stupid, right?
Right.
If you never actually talk to an AI, it's pretty dumb, right? You have to interact, but that just means you have to be very deliberate, right? When you're speaking to someone or you're using your phone. And I hope that when people look back at this time, they'll be like, man, they lived through a rough time. Like people, when we look back now and think about people without power and in
Mm-hmm.
internal bathrooms, like, oh, it must have been ugly. But I'm sure they didn't think about how bad they had it, right? If you've never had modern plumbing and electric lights, you don't know you're suffering,
Right.
right? If you've never had an AI system to help you get through the death of a spouse, or an AI system to help you get through really, anything, then it's it's going to seem you don't miss it. I think they definitely will wonder how we got through it. But like one of the things I did when we first started using a lot of AI with my family was I created something called BearBot, and BearBot was for my spouse as a just in case something happens to me. Um, and this is BearBot. It's a chat GPT that you can get from the GPT store.
Yes.
Well, you can get this one. This one's a private one shared just
Yes.
with my spouse, but you can get my book on GPT. And what I did was I uploaded my book and 20 years worth of journal entries. And BearBot now, my spouse can speak to BearBot, and BearBot will speak back as me in the way that I would answer a difficult life question. Um, it's this type of technology that I'm most excited for. When we think about what young people, will your children be able to access some digital version of you, not just the photos? And the answer is absolutely,
Of course.
100%.
Yeah.
But I doubt when you write your emails, you think my children, this is training some AI version of me my child will use. That's the first thing I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's beautiful. And I
Yeah.
think it's worth reflecting on who's training whom, right? So
Well, you nailed it. I
perhaps,
mean, that's
yeah,
kind of the 101. Yeah.
perhaps when generations down the road look back, they'll say, well, thank goodness that Chris and Carola got trained by the AI to be more intentional about how they live their lives.
Yeah.
That is what we leave behind in the end and nothing else.
I mean, think about GPS. Like GPS, when you're driving someplace, it'll usually offer you like the fastest way or the way without tolls if you live someplace where there's tolls. But there are so many other things that GPS could offer you. Take me the most way with the most scenic. Take me the way that I don't normally go, right? So this is the type of AI I want. I want an AI that understands I have needs beyond now. I need to be there now, or I need to be there cheap. Everything in the world is defined by how fast and how expensive. And I'll tell you one thing, when you're dying or your spouse is dying, the last thing you're worried about is the time you want more of it and the expense. And until we can get over that hurdle and do make one decision every day that's not tied to how much it's going to cost or how long it's going to take, your life will change instantly. Because having a watch strapped to you is a lot different than being strapped to a watch. And so many people are strapped to calendars in a way that's just garishly unhealthy.
yeah, yeah. It's teaching us to look at things differently.
Yeah. That's why I
Uh,
love Doug. Doug has Doug
yeah,
Rushkoff wrote
yeah,
that
yeah.
amazing book, Present Shock, well, his was Future Shock. No, his was Present Shock. Yeah. Future Shock was Gary Toffler.
That's right. Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. So he has several books, as do you. Tell us about your books.
I only have the one. I got a couple kind of self-published that no one knows about that I've given to people just as gifts because I sometimes will write a whole book for someone just to help them. But my book is called Don't Unplug: How Technology Saved My Life and Can Save Yours Too. It's only in English, unfortunately. The Kindle version is still available, and the Audible, where I read it for 8 hours. But it starts out when I was a child and walks through kind of some of the challenges and lessons. So like chapter 2 is about Miss Pac-Man and learning Miss Pac-Man in the 80s. And goes all the way through to me actually meeting my spouse. The book ended because I got the book deal before I met my spouse. But then as we were getting ready to go to print, I said, I've met someone and we're going to be engaged. Can I write about that? Each chapter is a period of time in my life with a specific set of lessons from that time. So there might be lessons about work or friendship or love. That's how the book ends, with love. And some specific examples for just using technology more deliberately. So it's kind of like self-story, and then what I learned, and then some things you can do in your life. And I tried to write it in a way that the technology advice would live beyond kind of the current application. So like in the chapter called Yelp Made Me an Ass, because the Yelp there where you kind of complain about businesses. I talk about like today you can order things on your phone, and no matter what you order, you can always put in special instructions. And one of the tips I talk about in the book from 2016 was always leave the driver some good wishes. Like, I appreciate you doing this today.
Beautiful.
Don't tell them like how to make your sandwich, right? Just thank them, So I really tried to think about it from a way of communicating how much you love someone you've never met in a way that they never expected.
Yeah. I even thank and say please and thank you and
Mhm.
the lovely work to ChatGPT. Go figure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe that's
Yeah.
how
Well,
my mom brought me up. Who knows?
yeah, well, the memory section of ChatGPT, I actually went ahead and put in that, please always use please and thank you, and I'm neurodivergent, and please use bullets and make things very clear. So yeah, again, it's even something as simple as that. I see a lot of people using ChatGPT, and I'm like, I write this email to my boss saying this and this, and I'm like, hold on, let's back up. Don't ask it to write an email. Do this instead. Say, my name is Chris, and I work for an IT company, and this IT company helps people build systems that align to their values. Today, I actually have to say something uncomfortable to my boss. My boss gets very worried about the status of the business and if it's going to be well. What I need to tell my boss is I need a couple of days off a month from now. Knowing what we do as a company and knowing what my boss worry about, can you please help me write this letter in a way that'll make him feel supportive of my request, but also help him deal with any anxiety or fear he might have? That's a much different email it's going to write than help me write an email to my boss. It's about telling the AI before you ask it for anything what you value and what the outcome you want to be is. And this is called constitutional AI. And once you train people on how to use AI with a set of constitution or values, it changes their lives because suddenly the AI starts to remember, oh, this is how you are. This is who you are. It's super important.
Yes, the desired outcome
Yeah.
as a
Yeah.
key principle for designing anything really.
Yeah.
So where can people find you?
I've got a website called chrisdancy.com. That's normally where people just read and stuff. If you just Google most connected, there's lots of news online, or lots of articles and videos and all sorts of things. Um, I'm on social media, like I have an Instagram, but it's just random stuff like that. I'm not really a content creator. I don't really make videos and show people how to do this stuff. I stress out a lot about the heavily content laden world that we live in. So I try not to contribute to it. And people are like, oh my gosh, I would kill if you had a podcast, or I would kill if you would just write a blog once a week or a newsletter. And I'm like, I understand, but like for me, it's more about like, if you need me, my phone number is on my website. So if anyone's listening to this message, this podcast, this video, my phone number is literally you can literally call me. I get phone calls from strangers all day long. My spouse will tell you. But yeah, before you go looking for me online, look for you.
Mm, Okay. So we like to close the podcast with a concept that I introduced in a book I wrote some time ago called Change Ahead.
Okay.
And the concept is the quest for questions. So
Ooh.
whenever we're navigating the unknown, there's one thing that we can be certain of. We have no answers. Like, how would you know, right?
Yeah.
What we do have is our curiosity. I think you're a prime example of what curiosity can do to help us create, a better world, even for ourselves. This is the name of this podcast, Transforming Worlds. You've transformed
Yeah.
your world, and so many other worlds are transforming and eventually contributing to the world transforming at large. When you look at the quest for questions that you've been on, it's always interesting to wonder, what's the next question I'm going to have? So, standing where you are now, having learned all of the things that you've shared with us, what's your next question?
Hmm. Is it okay not to have a question?
What's your reflection then? What's the thing
No,
to
but that would be
ponder?
my question.
Oh, beautiful. Your question is
Is
it
it okay to
okay
not have a
not have,
question?
you're right. Is it okay not to have a question?
That would literally, I literally went through every question I could possibly have or will have or have had. And I think the most important thing I'd want to know next is it okay to not wonder?
That's a very deep thought. That's
That's those you asked. I didn't really think
I
about
love
it.
it.
That's
I
a
love
good.
it because I think that perhaps one of the biggest transformations of our time, everyone's exhausted. Some get, take themselves to the level that you did take yourself to. Maybe we have to move from doing into being. It's also what you've been sharing that your spouse has been showing you.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
mean, listen, if there's one upgrade you can do, it's fall in love. I mean, it is the most transformational thing because someone truly in love is changed forever.
yeah. Beautiful. We're going to close with that.
All right.
And I want to thank you once more and wish you lots of luck in continuing to connect things because in the connection and in the interconnection is the key to the interbeing that is so much needed for everyone right now. Thank you so much for being with us, Chris.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.